Hi, my name is Andy Furnell, and I'm a Technology Ecosystems Manager working at Meta Connectivity. Today, I'm also here as Technical Lead for the OpenBNG project at the Telecom Infra Project, and I'm excited to share with you some of the work we've been doing with TIP members in developing the next generation of open and disaggregated BNG. Now, in a short while, I'm going to introduce our panel. We've got speakers from the lead operators who've been working on this project over the past 18 months. But first off, I'm going to recap some of the background for those of you who aren't familiar with the project. Okay, so let's start with the next generation bit. We all know network operators are always under pressure to provide fast, reliable, and cost-effective connectivity services. And that means they constantly need to evolve their networks with new technology to keep up with demand. So we've got these network operators who need to build bigger, better, and more cost-effective networks. Then on the other hand, we've also seen this huge consolidation in the supply chain. So if you're an operator, there's hardly any choice in what tech you have available to build your network, how much you're going to pay for that technology, and what new features it can bring. So for sure, OpenBNG is about building next generation technology that's bigger, better, and more cost effective than what came before. But it's also about taking a next generation approach to how we build that technology, focusing on industry-wide collaboration to enable new supplier business models, which in turn allow operators to build better networks and to build them in a more sustainable way. Okay, so we think we need to build something new, and we need to approach it, how we build it, in a different way. So now let's talk about how openness and disaggregation fit into the picture. On the left is a scenario you'll all be familiar with. A typical telco network built using black boxes from one or maybe two vendors. Hardware and software are tightly integrated, and you have mostly proprietary northbound interfaces. On the right, we see something different. Hardware and software come from different suppliers, and now we're building a multi-vendor open and disaggregated network. So what does that mean? First, let's talk about disaggregation. This is where we're breaking down those black boxes and decoupling the hardware from the software, which allows operators to pick and choose which hardware they want to deploy and what software they want to run on top of it. Then to openness, with products that implement open and standardized interfaces. So we get rid of the secret proprietary bits that limit how the technology can be deployed, and we make sure that any combination of hardware and software products should integrate properly. Now, part of this is about meeting the needs of operators. But when we separate hardware from software, we also enable new supplier business models. Each supplier has a smaller problem space to deal with. Hardware suppliers get to solve hardware problems, and software suppliers get to solve software problems. Now, as I said earlier, these concepts are nothing new in the data center, but it's only in the recent past that we've started to see similar changes in the telco network. So the journey with TIP started a few years ago, with some things that were very close to the data center. And that work has already delivered a variety of open and disaggregated solutions in the IP, MPLS, and optical domains. Since then, the portfolio has grown to cover other areas of the network, and there are now a variety of project groups covering core, backhaul, and access. So we've got 5 pieces, but this is a 6-piece Lego set. And if you're a fixed line operator wanting to disaggregate your network, something's missing. For these operators, the BNG is the beating heart of their networks. It's the aggregator for their fixed and mobile traffic. It provides the service intelligence for their fixed line customers, and it's the insertion point for the differentiated and value-added services they deliver to those customers. And because of those things, it's also the most complex and difficult part of their network to change. So we knew it was going to be super important, but we also knew it wasn't going to be easy. The work began last year with a group of like-minded operators. They all had very different networks, and they all brought different use cases and ideas to the table. But they all appreciated the need to take a joined-up approach, which we now call OpenBNG. Their vision was to align their different use cases behind a common set of technical requirements that would enable new and existing hardware and software suppliers to build OpenBNG products. Last year, they published those use cases and requirements in a white paper, which paved the way to start conversations with hardware and software suppliers. This was super important. The suppliers got good visibility of operator requirements, and the operators got good visibility of vendor roadmaps. And most importantly, we were able to calibrate and align both the requirements and roadmap at a very early stage. So now the products are starting to reach general availability, both sides can be certain they're heading in the same direction. Earlier this year, the technical requirements were finalized, and the operators have recently formalized the process with the first RFI for OpenBNG products. That RFI is still ongoing, but it's already delivering some useful and interesting insights, some of which I hope we'll hear about from our speakers shortly. So with all that said, now we're up to date, and it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. From BT, we have Paul Gunning.
Hi, my name is Paul Gunning. I work for BT in our Applied Research Department at Industrial Park in the UK. And for the past few years, I've been focusing on fixed line technologies and the BNG in particular, and more broadly open networking and disaggregation of physical network functions.
Thanks, Paul. And from Deutsche Telekom, we have Mario Kind.
Hello. Yeah, thank you, Andy. My name is Mario Kind. My employer is the Deutsche Telekom, and I'm working there as a professional R&D engineer. I have a 15-year background on fixed networks, and this was always around the improvements in strategic, technical, or even economical perspectives of our networks, and with a very, very special focus always on BNG and its related components like processes, the ecosystem, etc., to provide customers and our networks the best service. I was part of the ESDN community in the early days and participated here also in the evolution towards the disaggregated solution for network operators we are speaking today about. And OpenBNG was a great evolution of this work, and I was really happy to take a leading role here as well.
Great. Thanks, Mario. From Telefonica, we have Rafa Lopez.
Hi, thank you, Andy. I'm Rafael Lopez da Silva. I am responsible for the IP disaggregation activities in the Telefonica CTIO transport and IP area. I have been working in the evolution of the Telefonica IP networks for more than 20 years now, and always with a focus on subscriber management features. And since the last year, I have become involved in the Telefonica activities on disaggregation technologies and their applications in different IP network environments, mainly the DCSG solutions that we have already awarded in several countries. Telefonica is present, and this disaggregation of the BNG. We were co-authors of the OpenBNG position paper along with British Telecom, Deutsche Telekom, and Vodafone. And now by means of the OpenBNG TIP initiative since its inception.
Thanks, Rafa. And from Telecom Italia, we have Rosario Persico.
Hi, my name is Rosario Persico, and I'm a system engineer in a team working in the area of technology innovation and standardization. I've spent the last 10 years working on the fixed core, being involved with the development and testing of several technologies of BNG, both physical and virtual. Over the last 5 years, I've been more focused on the core network innovation in view of the 5G advent, edge computing, and cloudification. I'm a broadband forum delegate for TEAM, where in the last month, I've been involved with the finalization of the DBNG CAPS specification, with the development of the subscriber session steering concept, and with the announcement of the specification for the wireless wireline convergence. I joined the TIP OpenBNG community last year in November 2020. I had the previous experience with the disaggregation and open hardware thanks to an RFI that TEAM issued in 2018 for aggregation nodes. And most of the knowledge acquired in that context has been extremely useful in this group when developing the OpenBNG concept and the RFI document. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosario. And finally, from Vodafone, we have Ayman Hamza.
Thank you, Andy. My name is Ayman Hamza. I have 15 years of experience in ICT, specialized in fixed access network, and IP broadband, as well as SDN, NFV, and cloudification. I have joined the TEP project for OpenBNG in 2020, in November 2020. So I'm coming with equipped experience in IP broadband over 15 years in this technology. I have been dedicated by Vodafone for this project, where I can put my effort in defining the specs of the OpenBNG, as well as the any new features that enhances this technology in the market. Thank you, Andy.
So I explained earlier some of the high-level background to the project. So to get us started, I'm going to go around the table and ask each operator to share some of their more personal insights into why open and disaggregated BNG is so important to them. Let's start with you, Paul.
Oh, thanks, Andy. Well, I suppose, first instance, broadening the supplier base and really encouraging innovation through disaggregation of the network operating system software from the underlying hardware. And also, well, the diversity of suppliers at each of these levels ensures that we can harness the best solutions that meets, our evolving needs here at BT.
Well, if I may add something for the case of Telefonica, for us, flexibility and agility are key when it comes to evolving our networks. What we aim for with disaggregation is not having a network that is coupled to specific network products, and be capable of evolving the network as the speed that the market drivers impose on us. Gone are the days when you could deploy a network and forget about it for 10 years. The ever-growing capacity requirements and the need for new features and protocols make us to be constantly rethinking if what we have in place is still the right choice, or if we should be moving on to something else. The ultimate objective is to be capable of mix and match best of breed features that enable us to deploy the best technology anytime, anywhere. And for us, openness and disaggregations are a means to achieve that goal. The use of homogeneous hardware coupled with the use of open and common agreed interfaces to the Apple layers will enable that objective, and also will enable having an ecosystem that accounts for new additional players in the market, favoring innovation and agility to implement new features.
Regarding the challenges that OpenBNG is tackling from Vodafone perspective, is that we found OpenBNG is giving us the flexibility and the agility to do cherry picking and selection of the best features that suits the business needs of Vodafone. For example, we can deploy features from different vendors using its software, because, or thanks to the idea of disaggregation between software and hardware that OpenBNG is bringing on table. So we can deploy a specific vendor software on a different vendor hardware, which is opened and standard, that is applicable to Vodafone business needs and business requirements. So if we need a feature X from vendor X to be deployed on a specific hardware of vendor Y, then we can deploy such requirement easily without any problem. So we believe OpenBNG is flexible enough, agile enough to deploy whatever business requirement needs today and in the future for Vodafone and for any other operator.
Yeah, if I can add something as well, that really resonates for us as well. So BNG is really the one and critical element in our service production is introduced, and it was always developed further, it was always improved, but we are now really challenged in two directions. So The first one is we end up now in a complex and demanding environment with, in terms of requirements. This is a lot of stemming from regulatory perspective, but it's on the other side. This one element, as Raphael said, it's the one where we can introduce a flexibility, new features, and differentiate from here. And this is when the second issue, we really have successfully worked with our suppliers, but this reduction of choice due to the non-technical issues is hurting us in keep running and multi-supplier environment. And both together has a problem at the entrance barrier for new hardware and software suppliers is pretty high. And especially one of the major issues is transparency on our technical and operational requirements as such.
For TIM, the main opportunity we saw in the OpenBNG initiative was to federate with the other operators to give a common message to the industry. Pursuing disaggregation cannot mean giving up interoperability and standards. Whatever transformation is going to happen in the BNG context, we all need to capitalize the effort that we spend in the standard fora. We believe standards can avoid as much as possible industry fragmentation and can ensure open solutions and interoperability. However, sometimes standard compliant implementations might be not cost effective due to the need of defending market positions. And here is where TIP comes into the play. This community seeks to understand what the technology can achieve, remaining compliant with the standards, which is something very different from what the industry offers, being compliant to standards. In other words, we believe TIP can fill the gap between standards and cost-effective implementations.
Thanks, Rosario, for the great points, as well as to the other speakers as well. I think some really great points to get us started there. And I certainly remember we've discussed many of these points when we started working together last year and through the process as well. I think you all spoke in some way or another about the need for greater diversity in the supplier ecosystem. That's table stakes for OpenBNG, so let's start there. Rafa, why do you think this is so important?
Well, vendor diversity increases commercial competition, and that should result in reducing the cost per bit for fixed access subscribers. For sure, we can benefit from the increased innovation derived from vendor diversity, but truth be told, our purchasing logic still relies heavily on a successful business case, regardless the technology chosen.
Yeah, and if I may add something, I totally agree to this. Keeping costs is very important to us, and we really believe in broadening the supplier ecosystem is helpful here. Beside all these political issues, one thing that we can see is that there is somehow potential to tap the hyperscaler ecosystem or tap into this and look to the suppliers there. And especially here, because we see that there is a different scale of devices and sales and potentially also in cost improvements here.
So is it all about saving CapEx, or is there more to it than that?
Well, ultimately, we cannot prefer alternatives if the TCO we get from this solution is higher than the one we have with the existing ones. So in that respect, the disaggregated solutions are very attractive because they leverage the volume that the silicon market, the merchant silicon market has. And there will be CapEx savings there for sure, but we are also anticipating reduced operational costs because of the greater flexibility and agility, and those are not extremely related to the hardware costs.
Okay, so we have more commercial competition and more efficient operational practices, and that's going to make the managers happy. But how can we be sure that OpenBNG is going to be accepted by the engineers as well?
Well, I think, Andy, to address these, and we made this very clear, it's really one of the fundamental motivations of TIP broadly and the OpenBNG specifically to communicate our, comprehensive collective operator requirements, and then try to explain to the community clearly what a disaggregated BNG is and what we are anticipating in the near future. And by comprehensive, I mean the technical requirements. Well, we are all engineers at heart, as well as the operational scalability requirements. And that is really a missing piece, as most standardization efforts like the Broadband Forum or the Open Network Forum, and don't get me wrong, they are good for their scope of work, are concentrating on these specifics, but not on the more complete BNG element within all its aspects.
In our case, a very important feature, as humble as it may seem, and I'm sure it will make our engineers happy, is the possibility of doing a software swap and a hardware swap in an independent fashion if required. In that respect, we need to evolve the model towards zero-touch ways of working, not only for introducing new elements in the network, but also for upgrading the existing ones. All of that done in a remote fashion and with as less human intervention as possible. And that is not the case today, not even for the disaggregated solutions. And as I said before, programmability and agility to introduce new features like new protocols or new functionalities like NAT or DDoS or whatever. And all of that has to be, must make sure that it is done with homogeneous configuration through open SDN interfaces developed by the MASTIP working group to ease the BSS OSS integration. Otherwise, it would be a nightmare for our engineers.
Well, let me add to what my colleague Rafa here is saying, and I absolutely agree to what he said in his points. OpenBNG is, and thanks to the disaggregation of the hardware and software that it brings to the industry, can introduce and insert smoothly any new feature into the market on OpenBNG. And the reason is the flexibility and the agility in bringing new features into the market, but in much better way. What I mean by much better way is that all the features are enabled in hardware-based, not software-based like the old-fashioned BNGs. And this will bring better performance compared to the old BNGs, and higher scalability compared to the old BNGs as well. For example, the hierarchical quality of surface when it is deployed on OpenBNG, where the disaggregation between hardware and software is there, will bring into the picture better performance in terms of scheduling and dequeuing the packets outside the queues. So it will be faster and quicker. And as well as the scalability will be much higher because of it is hardware-based hierarchical quality of surface. So the number of queues, the number of shapers, the number of schedulers will be much, much higher in terms of scalability. So the message here that we are giving to the industry is that OpenBNG will give the flexibility to scale high and perform better than the old BNGs in terms of any features that will be introduced to the OpenBNG or introduced to the market. In addition to this, features like quality of attenuation and features like subscriber session steering, when it is there available in the OpenBNG, all these features will be hardware-based features. So you can imagine as well how much it will scale high and perform better compared to the solutions with old BNGs or old-fashioned BNGs, which are still available in the market.
I think those are really great points. I just want to come back to a point Mario made You said something about OpenBNG. It doesn't sound like a standard, right? We're not developing standards here. So what is it?
Yeah, I would say OpenBNG, HLD, and LLD both explicitly refer to standards. Actually, in OpenBNG, seen as a black box, is required to behave as is specified by the Broadband Forum. Main specific reference specifications are TR11, TR180, TR187, and so on. So no doubts, we embraced the standards, but for sure, we are not defining them. We don't want to do that.
Exactly. We have started from this, and it's super important that these standards exist. Let me we are adding here something. So we mentioned high-level design is this comprehensive overview of what a BNG is. It explains its main components, the main requirements, its relation to other elements. So it's one thing what we learned also that this needs to be clear to all. Also engineers need to maybe are interested in this to understand the context. So that's a good starter. The second thing is this low-level design that Rosario also mentioned. It's referring to a very, very comprehensive set of requirements, which we term also the OpenBNG RFI always. For example, for DT, it's covering more or less 80–90% of our DT requirements in hardware and software for BNG, because the missing percentages are always the requirements which are very unique to us, and we have decided not to include them here. So just to make also this clear. Very important is also for us that this is somehow a discussion. So it's and we want to continue this discussion. So it's not really like in a standard defining organization. We open up this process early on to suppliers. We included feedback right from the beginning. We have many workshops with vendors, with chipset suppliers to understand what to do. And I personally really believe this is a super important part of this community building to get this thing, get the OpenBNG and disaggregated solutions. Essentially, we are also keen to interact and understand the new ideas, the clever ideas. We're missing things where we have to evolve, and we come back to this later, most probably also, and the future direction for BNGs. And last but not least, this is also an effort to somehow define the state of the market and give some information to everybody. And this is very, very important for us.
I mean, I completely concur with what Mario has just outlined there. I mean, in my case, I've been talking with merchant silicon suppliers since 2008, and really hardware and software providers since the start of my career in the last century. And I think we've been able to understand during the process how the scalability of a BNG solution is impacted by many factors, and how the complexity of the offered services can affect the total number of, say, subscribers attached to a single box. But also we've appreciated that likely the future generations of BNG will not be limited by computing resources for the control plane, as this now is easily cloudified, and that probably user plane resources are likely to be the more limiting factor.
Well, thanks a lot for my colleagues for bringing very good ideas and concepts around the OpenBNG. But let me add one thing which we will bring to the market as well when OpenBNG will be returned as a real prototype in the market. Recently and publicly, we have published as Vodafone a multi-vendor interoperable testing between different vendors in control plane and user plane for CUPS, which is CUPS basically, as you know, thanks to the broadband forum in standard TR 459, is a kind of disaggregation between user plane and control plane, which is basically cloudifying the BNG. We in Vodafone we tested different vendors in control plane and user plane, and that was successful testing between different vendors. And we went public into this testing. So you can imagine when OpenBNG is there in the market, you can easily introduce the OpenBNG software and hardware that you as an operator choose or have chosen for the OpenBNG deployment, the deployment that you wish, that you like to do, and insert it as a user plane with the existing control plane. So this is something important in terms of cost effect, in terms of agility, and in terms of simplicity in the deployment without changing your control plane. So this is cost reduction as well, which is very important to tackle when you deploy the OpenBNG in your network.
Clarification. Rosario, you're involved in defining the broadband forum standards in this area. You mentioned some of them earlier. Can you expand on the intersection between what we're doing with open and disaggregated BNG through OpenBNG and the disaggregated CUPS architecture in the BBF?
Yes, sure. As already said by Paul, cloudifying the control plane of BNG seems achievable. For user plane, technology is still maturing, but it seems promising, at least for some contexts. In the meantime, there are alternative solutions which are anyway cost-effective and could be adopted also in short time. This is important because it means that since now we can embrace the new paradigm arising in the standard fora of the control user plane separation, so-called CUPS. CUPS is a form of disaggregation, perhaps the first one proposed by standard bodies with, let's say, in high pedigree, such as 3GPP and Broadband Forum. And as a form of disaggregation, CUPS is under our attention in TIP. CUPS distinguishes in BNG a brain from the muscles, enabling their implementation on different kinds of platforms, well suited for one or the other scope. So CUPS is the main enabler for cloudification, in our opinion. Most of you might be aware of the benefits expected from CUPS in terms of, for example, simplified operations. However, we in TIP have embraced the CUPS because we believe that it can also sharpen the specialization in the industry. I mean, CUPS could open to new industry scenarios where merchant silicon and white box suppliers could brilliantly bring forward the innovation in the field of data planes. As a consequence of that, CUPS might widen the provider list involved with the BNG developments. It could create new business opportunities. It could reduce the business risks for each of the single players. And it could even encourage partnerships, co-developments, and any other form of cooperation that, in our opinion, could be beneficial not only to operators, but to the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, I fully support this view, Rosario. CUPS is one of these very interesting elements bringing forward the evolution of BNG, bringing forward convergence. But I want to make a point that there's a second important motivation and that how the future of disaggregation look like. So maybe short history. So BNDT have started with more than 10 years ago with SDN in trying to get more programmability. It didn't work. Access for the Zero program started with the TU Darmstadt to develop this further and found a way on new hardware, which was then available last year's merchant silicon hardware. And when next step came started make a startup development with a startup for a BNG. This is now live. It's working since 1 year in our German network, and now we are really need to make the next step. And as Rafael mentioned, for mix and matching hardware and software and building this community and go forward. But still, we think we have to check the architectures and how they evolve and if this is the right way. And one thing that I and colleagues in my company believe is that the BNG must evolve towards these convergence, that we must converge mobile networks and align them more. We have to also to tackle somehow the legacy issue and the double production, double elements. But this is really a way forward. So what I most probably want to make is the point that there are more steps to come, and one is that we really believe that this transition from hardware to software is enabling us for new things. But still, what we have learned, for example, also is the software implementations are not completely independent of the hardware. There are dependencies, and it's very frequent. Often we ships it as the case where they rely on, and there is no single API, for example, there. So this is again what I think I want to say is we have done a lot of steps as each partner by himself, all together, and there will be more steps to come, and this will evolve and will become a longer term thing to move forward.
We heard a lot about how mix and match of hardware and software can make things more diverse, more cost effective, more operationally efficient. And we heard about, as a community, we're working together to take standards, existing standards, emerging standards, to commercialize them, bring them to market, and to identify new areas of work, new areas of research that might be needed as well. That's the theory, but we're in an RFI now to understand the reality. We mentioned earlier that you launched this RFI during the summer to evaluate the market. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, maybe I can start, and please let me share first some observations. So it was a very challenging activity. So we, as an operator community, are not just 5 operators. We are representing 30 plus operations worldwide, and we really have a lot of history in these networks, a lot of legacy, and we really had to agree among us what to include and what to leave out. So it is possible, and we did it. It's really challenging. And personally, also for me, it was a very interesting experience, given that nobody ever tried to do it with such a very complex device like a BNG before. And I anyhow think that we have to improve a BNG to keep up with the demands for the next decade that is coming.
So, well, if I may add something, each network is similar, but at the same time different in terms of architecture. For us in Telefónica, the DBNG type that the OpenBNG project started with, by that I mean the one that you have the control and the user plane consolidated in just one box. For us, it enables a deployment with minimal impact in the current architecture and in the associated management systems. However, over the course of the OpenBNG project, we collectively decided also to prepare the path for more evolved architectures like CUPS, like Rosario was mentioning, control and user plane separation, which would require a deeper transformation of our current fixed broadband access model. So that way, each operator can decide when to undertake that migration. From the answers that we are getting from the RFI, we are seeing products that are based on CUPS and also these kind of DBNG type products, and many vendors that are targeting both approaches. So in the end, I think it's not such a controversial thing, because I think we will have the flexibility, each of us, to deploy what's best for our networks.
So it's great. I think seeing both solutions, I think, is super important. Continuing the CUPS topic, in terms of what we've seen so far, what do we think about the CUPS solutions we've seen so far?
Yeah, the RFI results show that there are vendors that are developing software according to standard TR 459, so the CUPS specification. And they are implementing the user plane either on open hardware or as a software CNF. And this is really a good sign, because it shows that CUPS is coming, and also different type of user planes will be available. There are also vendors who plan to have both kinds of solutions, so hardware and software. This approach seems really interesting, as it is flexible and it allows partnerships creation. Actually, we believe that the complexity of a BNG can be sliced into small pieces, like Andy mentioned it in the earlier presentation. And this software can be designed as three different components. The first component is the software for the control plane, which can run surely on a generic CNI. The second part will be running on a user plane, and it will allow the user plane to be controlled by a centralized entity, possibly also geographically separated from the user plane itself. And the third component will be running on the user plane and will be focused on driving the chipset fabric. And this is the component essentially silicon dependent, which will be used to hide the underlying data plane mechanism to the rest of the system. So we see that adopting this approach, we see that there are a lot of opportunities for the industry, because it allows vendors to focus on one or the other component in terms of software. And we see that new partnerships are arising. This was very clear from the RFI results, and we hope that this trend will gain momentum in the future.
So a whole variety of different solutions, CUPS, non-CUPS, hardware and software. Any other kind of surprises there?
Well, first of all, we have been very pleasantly surprised by the number of responses we have received. And for us, this proves the traction that the disaggregation of the BNG can bring into the ecosystem, and how lively the ecosystem is becoming. And for sure, that will translate into future innovation in the future that we may be unaware as of today. Even in the hardware space, which is more demanding in terms of development, investment, and software, we have received proposals not only that are not based only on Broadcom, but also on other silicon providers as well. So again, this is for us a proof of the interesting case that the disaggregation of the BNG is.
Maybe I can add something here that was very overwhelmed about the contributions and submissions. I really didn't expect to have such a choice of different device suppliers and software suppliers. And I mean, we have been in many discussions with vendors before, and we have been promoting the OpenBNG initiative extensively, but still this number of submissions is great. And I can see from that the suppliers are really interested. We received answers with very, very detailed explanations about the roadmap, about the way how the OpenG could involve, what other parts are. And this feels like really being valued from the supplier side, and that OpenBNG is an attractive idea to them, and they want to propose something. And one of the things is that it looks like the vendors are really adjusting their development plans and business opportunities to this. So this is also what we can see from the AFI. So overall, it really looks like our initiative has hit a nail in that sense.
Well, for me, if I will speak about the RFI, I will reflect my experience actually while I am evaluating. So I would the responses. So I would say, we would like to thank all the vendors who have been contributed, and we are sure that more vendors will come and more operators will be involved in our project. We will, or I have found in the responses that I had a look about is some vendors went software only, some vendors went software and hardware, some vendors went to be hardware only providers. But the good thing is the cooperation between some vendors in terms of integration and interoperability between their solutions. So some vendors, they already tested their software-based OpenBNG with hardware-based vendors, which they have already contributed in the RFI. And some other vendors, they have tested their hardware with other software vendors who are contributed as well in this RFI. So I do believe that we have a story that we can build on the top of that contribution from all these vendors, especially when it will come to the testing phase of the OpenBNG after shortlisting the vendors that have better contribution in this RFI.
That's a very opposite observation. I mean, there's a very diverse ecosystem of disaggregated suppliers out there, and each of them brings something unique. And we see a sort of cross-fertilization too. We see software suppliers coming from the IP MPLS space looking to build BNGs, and we see BRAS vendors looking to develop an IP MPLS stack to become, if you like, a full-blown BNG. We also see solutions from the more established players and traditional vendors, as well as the new entrants and the startups we've always spoken about. So we think that they all have something to bring, and it's quite exciting to see from my point of view.
Sorry, I think I was on mute. Yes, for sure. Traditional vendors, they can bring with them a valuable treasure, which is their expertise for developing BNG products for decades. But we must not trade that for barriers in terms of interoperability when it comes to introducing new protocols or APIs in our architectures. We must be clear and determined to stick to open standards and make sure that those standards do not fall short and do not account for gray areas ready for vendor-specific improvements. Okay, having said that, OpenBNG is open. How can it be to traditional vendors? And we perceive that their expertise contribution very valuable for an open ecosystem, and we're already seeing it.
Yeah, I would say that BNG traditional vendors are now driving the transformation towards CAPS and WWC. They have the responsibility to make this new paradigm successful in a very complex context where on one end, operators are seeking to get rid of vendors lock-in and to get rid of oversized and expensive solutions. On the other hand, there are new vendors, sometimes well established in contiguous market areas, that might step into the game. So this is actually an aspect that resulted quite clearly from the RFI. A number of well-known vendors specialized in routing, for example, are considering to develop a BNG disaggregated solution, sometimes in partnership with the other vendor that may have, for example, a stronger position in the software development area. So what we have seen is that new partnerships are arising, and this could be very beneficial for everybody, including BNG vendors that I'm sure will be able to identify new business opportunity in this changed context.
Maybe I would like to step in again, and one observation which I missed is very important, because what it looks like is that suppliers really struggle to have a complete solution already available today, and they have to adjust features in their roadmap to provide something. So we think the suppliers can ultimately deliver on what we need today, but it leads to my thinking that I or we all together as operators and our network designs and operations and architectures are potentially still too complex, and most probably we have to revisit this and think about how we can stop that these things become even more complex over time. And yeah, this is very difficult. As said, there are also complex challenges stemming from regulation, from consumer protection, from competition, and etc. But as I also said before, I think this is a journey, and then we continuously evolve, and power of software will give us tools to tackle these challenges.
Yeah, I think in addition to what Rosario and Mario have just outlined, I mean, I hope and indeed I'm sure that the contribution and the effort from the vendors and like my peers, my operator colleagues, will encourage other vendors and other operators, to contribute. We're still not finished; it's still ongoing. To this project as we have done, and also to my colleagues who've hosted in the event today as well. So great.
Thank you all so much. And thanks to each of our speakers for the discussion. As we heard earlier, the operators are currently collaborating on an RFI for open and disaggregated BNG products. They'll be hosting a webinar later in the month to share the results and shortlisting of that RFI. And after that, we'll be bringing the most promising combinations of hardware and software together into the lab for testing, and doing that in a coordinated way. Remember, this is an open and collaborative process, so if you'd like to get involved, please get in touch with myself or my colleagues here today. And you can check out the TIP website for more information about this and any of the other initiatives I mentioned earlier. So once again, on behalf of the panelists, I'd like to thank you all for your attention, and please welcome any questions.